Zach. I just want to thank everyone first for just being part of this community and joining us here today. If you don't know who Sheri is yet, prepare to be amazed. For one, Sheri is a prominent global subject matter expert in the fields of disability and accessibility in both business and educational settings. She's also best known for launching accessibility programs at multiple Fortune 200 companies, including McDonald's, Albertsons, and recently VMware. She also works with governments to help improve accessibility. That said, she's Medium's 2020 Author of the Year for their largest publication, the UX Collective. In fact, her book, Giving a Damn About Accessibility, was published by the UX Collective this week, and it's available for free right now at accessibility.uxdesign.cc. So without further ado, I present to you Sheri Bernhaber.
Thanks, Zach. So I am here to talk today. I stole the title for this talk from Samantha Evans, who runs the accessibility certification programs for the International Association of Accessibility. And we timed it once, and we realized that the things that people with disabilities look at when they're going through a new website or a new mobile app or a new product can pretty much be accomplished in 8 seconds. And in 8 seconds, that user will make a determination whether they're going to continue to stay and try to learn to use the product, or whether they're just going to bail out and go use somebody else's product. Since 97% of the web is inaccessible to people who use assistive technology, it's kind of a coping mechanism that people with disabilities have developed to just not waste time. That means 49 times out of 50, when they go to a new website, new mobile app, new product, they're not going to be able to use it. And so they want to invest the minimum amount of time possible to make that threshold decision, and then decide if they're going to fish or cut bait. So I'm going to introduce myself a little bit first. I have a very multidisciplinary background for somebody who's in accessibility. I started off with a degree in computer science. Then after 10 years of practicing software QA, I became a lawyer. And then at the end of law school, I thought that I was going to go into software patents and intellectual property, something that we refer to as the anesthesiology of the law profession. You don't have to bail people out of jail. There's nothing seamy about it. It's always good cases. Third year law school, we discovered that my daughter, my middle daughter, Patricia, was losing her hearing. And I ended up getting into accessibility because of her disability, not because of my own. I actually have a congenital disability. I was born with malformed bones in my feet. And I've had dozens of surgeries. And at this point, any distance 50 yards, I do in my wheelchair. I did found the VMware accessibility program. I also co-founded the Disability at VMware Employee Resource Group. We have about 800 members right now. And because I also have glaucoma, I only use computers with magnification and with keyboards, because I it's in my hands, and so I struggle to use a mouse. So I've got a number of different perspectives on disability through lived experience that I bring to this. I am also, my fun fact is I've been doing Paralympic archery for about 1.5 years now. I started it about 3 months before the pandemic started, and fortunately I have enough space at home where I can shoot. This is my backyard, and I am now up to the Olympic distance, and I am starting to be not terrible. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe I'm a 20 Paralympic archery hopeful. Okay, so some disability statistics. First of all, 18% of the population identifies out in the census as having one or more disabilities. You can see the number sometimes as high as 25%. It depends where the age cutoff is. So after you get at about age 65, the rates of disabilities goes up considerably. But if you're looking at just the working population, 18 to 65, it's going to be somewhere in that 12 to 18% kind of range. People with disabilities spend $8 trillion with a T dollars globally every year. That's just discretionary spending, stuff that they're not spending in food and medicine, but that they're spending it on movie tickets and software and, going out and buying a new pair of shoes or a purse or, whatever it is that they're out shopping for. It's a lot. 51% of the global gross national product is spent either by people with disabilities or their first degree friends and family. So their parents, their siblings, their spouses, their children. That's a lot of money. That is the majority of the spending that goes on in this world is somehow connected to somebody with a disability. And then finally, 92% is the number of people with disabilities who will head to a more accessible competitor without telling you if they can't use your website or products. People with disabilities are tired of complaining. We're tired of people not listening. So there are enough accessible people out there that we will be able to find an accessible way to spend our money, and that's the way we prefer to do it. So first of all, accessibility is about visible disabilities. Number of pictures here. Stevie Wonder, we know he's blind. Marlee Matlin, we know she's deaf. Stephen Hawking, we know that he had his motor neuron disorder and the famous American accent that he spoke with through his speech synthesis system and his eye gaze keyboard. Madison Del Rosario is a Paralympian who has her own Barbie. I actually have a Barbie. I have that Barbie in my office that I haven't been in since February of last year. So hope it's still there when I go back. And a really recent advent in accessibility has been accessible gaming. So 2 years ago, 2 Super Bowls ago, Microsoft released its accessible Xbox. It's Xbox controller that could be operated with a single finger. And so that has propagated just an escalation of all kinds of accessible gaming options that are now available to children and gamers with disabilities. So a lot of people think about this when they think about disability. But accessibility is also about hidden disabilities. Everyone whose picture is on this screen has a disability. Selena Lopez has lupus and had a kidney transplant. Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things is deaf in one ear. Bono, like me, has glaucoma. Those rose-tinted glasses that he's known for, turns out he got those because they help him see well, not because it's some kind of Hollywood affectation. Lil Wayne, Elton John, and Prince all had epilepsy. Prince had epilepsy. Lil Wayne and Elton John are still with us. And the reason why Facebook's primary color is blue is Mark Zuckerberg has a fairly severe form of color blindness, and blue is really the only color that he sees well. So you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about what constitutes disabilities, it's not always stuff that you see. Sometimes it's stuff that you don't see. It's also about things that are bound by time. So you can have permanent disabilities, such as a limb difference, something that you have congenitally. You can have a temporary disability, such as a shoulder injury. If your arm's in a sling, it's going to behave in a very similar way as a limb difference for a shorter period of time, because when your shoulder injury heals, you go back to not having that limb difference. While you're only going to be able to use one hand. Situational disabilities are typically even shorter. So for something to heal, but that you're waiting for something to resolve. So in this case, if you're a bag of groceries, you're going to have the exact same issue as a person with a temporary disability or a person with a permanent disability. You're only going to be able to use one hand. And so when you add all of these up together, you're talking about, probably 30% or more of the population at any given time has a combination of permanent, temporary, or situational disabilities that are either visible or invisible. So I'm not going to be able to play this movie right now, apologies, but the link is in the deck, and Zach is also going to put the link, maybe it is going to play, not sure. Anyways, the Sadie video is my favorite video on assistive technology. Assistive technology is what people with disabilities use to do something that they can't do or perceive and turn it into something that they can do or perceive. So assistive technology, you might think, oh, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what a piece of assistive technology is. Well, if you've ever done pinch to zoom on a phone, congratulations, you've used assistive technology. So that is probably the most common form of assistive technology. If you've ever turned on captions at the gym while you were doing a spin class, congratulations, you've used assistive technology. There's also some more specialized forms of assistive technology. Screen readers, you'll hear about very commonly, are used by people with vision loss, usually people who are legally blind, but also occasionally by people with dyslexia or people who can't read for other reasons. And that takes the screen in front of the user and turns it into sound so that they can understand the sound and figure out what's going on. Another common form of assistive technology that maybe will be the best 2 minutes you ever spend. Please watch it afterwards. I think I've watched it close to 170 or 180 times at this point, and I never get tired of it. Switches are what people who can't use their hands use, or who were born without hands use in order to interact with technology. So accessibility is measured using a standard called Wcag, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So you can, on the left, we have a timeline. 2.0 came out in 2009. Same month that 2.0 came out, iPhones came out. So guess what? The 2.0 standard, which is what's currently used by a lot of people in the US, doesn't have any mobile guidelines associated with it. 2.1 included mobile guidelines. That came out about 2 years ago, June of 2018, coming up on 3 years now. 2.2 is supposed to be coming November of 2021. So the last, hopefully final draft just got released last week. And then 3.0, which is going to be a big reorganization with a bunch of new standards and a bunch of new ways of looking at things. That'll be coming in 2023 sometime. So there are 3 levels: A, AA, AAA. AAA is the strictest. Nobody does AAA. Most regulations and courts have settled on AA as the intermediate standard. So A is the deal breakers. If you're violating an A guideline, like you're not providing captions for your videos, for example, you're blocking an entire people, a whole group from being able to use your software who have a particular disability. If you're violating a AA guideline, you're just making it hard. But making it hard isn't good either, because the US public sector has decided on 2.0 AA as its standard as of July in 2018. Shall we say that disability rights stagnated a bit in the last administration without getting too political? And EU and Canada and Australia zoomed past the US. They are now using the newer 2.1 standard for their public sector purchases. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the first 8 seconds that a person with a disability spends on a website. The very first thing that they look for as a warning sign that a site isn't accessible is the use of something called an overlay. And an overlay is something that a software IT person installs that sits on top of the website, and it tries to take an inaccessible website and turn it into something that's usable. It actually does a really, really poor job of that, and in many cases, it actually makes things worse. So if you ever see these company names on the right-hand side, Accessibility, UserWay, AudioEye, Equal Web, Max Access, User First, True Abilities, that is sign number 1 that you are likely not going to be able to use this website. And if you can use it, you have to use that tool as your assistive technology. All of your assistive technology that is finely honed and customized exactly for your use over time, none of that will be available to you. It's a very frustrating experience. People with disabilities hate it. I'm not picking on any one of these companies individually. I am highlighting the problems that overlays present overall to accessibility, because they trick business people into thinking, oh yeah, I've solved that pesky accessibility problem, when really the customers aren't happy with the solution. Or about the problems presented by overlays, I recommend going to a website called overlayfactsheet.com. And visually, how do you tell that there's an overlay being used at your site? Well, somehow every single website vendor has decided to use a simplified form of Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man with the US disability colors of blue and white. That is the symbol that an overlay is being used on a website. As soon as you spot that, most people bail out. Okay, they're also sometimes called plugins or widgets. They're aimed at improving website accessibility by making improvements to the front-end behavior, but in reality, they don't fix the underlying code, and they force the users to use the tool rather than using their own assistive technology, which is why they are somewhat despised by the disability community. Actually, a website now called Accessibility, which is a takeoff on Accessibility, which is the largest tool vendor. They provide code for users to be able to block the tools from working, so that the users can then try to use their own assistive technology for getting around. Okay. Warning sign number 2, poor color choices. Color choices are really simple from the coding perspective to make changes to, but they're really complicated from the psychological and emotional and stakeholder perspective. You know, I came from a company where people were just religiously wedded to French fry yellow. And that is a color that's not particularly accessible, especially on white backgrounds, because there's not enough contrast between the yellow and the light background to be able to read the text. So you can see we've got a black and white, pretty high contrast example on the left. We've got stuff on the right. I am told there are words here because of my glaucoma. I couldn't even tell you what the words are. So this would be an example of very poor contrast. And colors are instantly visible. I swear, when my youngest daughter was about 12, she would start pointing out signs and ads on TVs and websites and go, "Mommy, those colors aren't accessible, are they?" So it is really easy to instantaneously get a feel for whether or not some attention has been paid to the color choices or not. Another way that you can go wrong with color choices is mixing red and green. So on the left, we have a picture of a football team with red and green uniforms. The NFL was trying to sell more uniforms, switching up the colors to try to get people to buy more uniforms. Well, what they didn't realize is without the names on the back of the jerseys, to somebody who's colorblind, and the right-hand example is the same image run through a red-green color blindness simulator. That's the most common form of color blindness in the US. The colorblind NFL fans couldn't tell which team was which. There just wasn't enough accessible color information being provided back to them. Well, guess what? 4% of the male population is colorblind. Who likes football? Well, women like football, but it's largely men. So the NFL really alienated their colorblind audience with these uniform choices about 4 years ago. So anytime you see people mixing red and green, that's a sign that no thought has been given to color accessibility whatsoever. Okay, the third thing that people frequently look for, and sometimes the first thing that I look for, is magnification. Magnification uses responsive breakpoints. If you have a website that has not been set up to work on a mobile phone, chances are magnification at the desktop level isn't going to work. So horizontal scroll not allowed with magnification. If you're doing responsive breakpoints and magnifying correctly, all of the text should reflow. All of the containers should enlarge so that no text is spilling out over the side of a button. You know, a hamburger menu is supposed to pop up to give you options that you no longer have the screen real estate to represent. So if you're not doing any of those things, then it's a magnification fail, and chances are, you know, again, nothing else has been paid attention to accessibility. All it takes is a couple of in order to check that. It's literally a split second. Another problem caused by that shows up with magnification is blurry text. When people embed text in images, it's not live text anymore, it's pixels. And what happens is when somebody who uses magnification like me blows the screen up to, I use usually about 200%, the text that's embedded in an image will start to pixelate, and either I'll get a headache or I just won't be able to read it at a certain point. So that's another quick sign with magnification that somebody wasn't paying attention to accessibility with particular attention to the content that was being deployed on the website. Okay, warning sign number 4, again, a split-second determination, is lack of quality caption. This is my friend Meryl Evans. She lives in Wales, but she's originally from Texas, and she's deaf. So she's actually got 3 accents. She's got a Texas accent, a Welsh accent, and what we call a deaf accent. Because people with a substantial level of hearing loss, if they choose to speak with a very particular nasal tone, and there's differences in how they make high frequency sounds. So on the left-hand side, we have Meryl speak. She has done a custom caption for the sentence that she said, which is, I call them auto-captions because they're riddled with mistakes. And then on the right-hand side was an automatic captioning system where it came out a possum or question because there was mistake. Complete gobbledygook. Microsoft Teams captions that are on my power. Caption engines are better. Been able to do inline that flashed up was an example. Came up as overtime 1 word, in 2 words. The subsequent, I was using it as a 2-word phrase and not a single-word phrase. So get at it, 2 things. One is accents. Auto captions are very poor. They're calibrated for, you know, Midwest English. If you're not speaking Midwest native English, frequently the captions come out poorly. And the second thing is they can't do anything that's not in their dictionary. So on MS Teams right now, if I say hyperconverged infrastructure using Kubernetes, you can see it actually came up correctly, but that's because Microsoft Teams has included those terms in their dictionary. And of course, Microsoft just has one captioning engine, and it's used by Cortana. It's a speech recognition engine. It's used by Cortana. It's used by Teams. It's used by PowerPoint. Okay, accessibility warning sign number 5 is text alternatives. In order for a screen reader to announce something out loud, you need to provide all your graphics text alternatives. Now, text alternatives depends on context. Correct text alternative for this image could be dog on beach. If you were selling sunglasses, it could be dog wearing sunglasses on beach. The sunglasses suddenly become relevant. If you're selling beach products, it could be dog wearing sunglasses in hammock on beach. If it's an article about Jack Russell Terriers, it could say Jack Russell Terrier wearing sunglasses in hammock on beach. Or you could actually have your alt text set to null. Alt text to null, what you're telling the screen readers is this image is just here to be pretty. It's decorative. It's not conveying any information. Pretend that it's not here. But that's different than not setting it at all. If you don't set it at all, it'll just say graphic or image, and it won't provide any description. And it also slows the blind user down, because what do they do with the information graphic or image? Nothing. what it tells them is, okay, there's a picture here, and somebody didn't care enough to describe it or categorize it as decorative. So you want to use the shortest amount of text possible to convey the level of information that's appropriate for the context in which that image is being used. Okay, dyslexia friendliness is important. Never, ever justify. Justification creates rivers of text that make it really hard to decode, which is the word for read for somebody who's dyslexic, to decode text. When you get weird spacing with words, it's just impossible for them to know what line they're on, and it really just causes problems. So no right justification, no center justification for your text. Okay, number 7 is skip links or focus indicators. So I've included some screenshots here from my own site, VMware.com. So the first bar is just the VMware.com horizontal nav bar as it comes up. Then if you hit the tab button, as soon as you've loaded VMware.com, the first thing that happens is skip to main content comes up. Why? Because it's detected user, and it's offering you the opportunity to bypass all the navigation and go straight into the main content of the page. What happens is the focus moves to the next object. So you can see the focus is now on About Us. And I actually have 2 focus indicators here, which help me out. I have the one that VMware provided, which is the dashed blue one. And then I use the Chrome focus indicator, which is optionally available on Chrome, which is actually larger and thicker and configurable by me. And that helps me see where I am, because I want to know when I hit the return key, what's going to happen. If I hit the return key where I am on that third horizontal nav bar, it's going to take me to the About Us page, because that's where the focus is located. And then finally, accessibility warning sign number 8 is keyboard operation. Almost all assistive technology works based on keyboard simulation. If you don't have every single object that's activatable by a mouse also activatable, you are not going to be accessible, just flat out. So everything has to be reachable from the keyboard. No hover-only behavior, no touch-only behavior, no swipe-only behavior, okay? Because any of those automatically makes your product unequal to somebody who uses a keyboard, which is most people who use assistive technology. You don't want any jiggle the mobile device, to undo something or get a prize. You have to have keyboard equivalents defined for all of these things. And then you have to have somewhere where the user can actually find out what the keyboard equivalents are. You can't have any keyboard traps. If you can get into it with a keyboard, you have to be able to get out of it from a keyboard. You can't assume that people can touch the device or manipulate the screen or a mouse in any way. No keyboard twister. If you're going to provide those keyboard short, hover only, touch only, swipe only, you only can use one function key associated with that. And then, as I mentioned earlier on the previous screen, the keyboard focus indicator always has to be visible, and you always have to have good contrast with it. Okay, so for bonus points, let's say we got through those 8 things and those 8 things look good, the next thing that somebody might look at is status changes. So status changes are really common, especially on shopping sites or retail sites in general. So I like next to a bag, probably too close, of Java chip Oreos right now. And so if I wanted some Oreo yogurt and I put it in to my cart, what did it do? It not only added the bag of Oreos to the cart, which was immediately adjacent to the action, it also updated the amount to complete the order, and it changed the information about the coupon that was available, about the points that I was getting for the items. When you have one action that triggers a number of behaviors elsewhere, all of those triggered behaviors have to be announced to screen reader users, because otherwise it's not an equivalent experience. If I'm blind and I add that Oreo yogurt to my cart, Okay, it tells me that the Oreos are in the cart, great, but unless it gives me all the rest of the information about the coupons and the shopping fee and everything else that was added, it's not going to be an equal experience. So that's the next thing that people who are blind frequently look for to see if the site is going to work for them. So just to wrap up, accessibility is what we call a team sport. And what I mean by that here is that everybody has, your communications have to be accessible. You have to have accessibility training or contractors with accessibility skill sets if you don't have the right people in-house. Your support has to be accessible. Your development life cycle has to be accessible. Your job descriptions have to be accessible. You have to be measuring people. Are we giving people bonuses based on getting projects out the door? Or are we giving people bonuses based on getting accessible projects out the door? Apple, for example, gives leaders a 10% bonus just measured on accessibility and dimensions of diversity and inclusion. What we call a carrot as opposed to a stick. They're not taking something away if you're not accessible, but they're not giving it to you if you're not accessible either, because at Apple, accessibility is really important. Programs have to be accessible. You have to make sure that you buy accessible tools for your own company's use, because if you buy a bunch of inaccessible tools, nobody who has a disability is going to want to work at that company. It's going to be too difficult for them to get their jobs done. So procurement plays a role. Culture plays a role. Is the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative? These things factor internally into whether or not a company is mature in accessibility or not mature in accessibility. And I am going to skip through the rest of this because I think I'm running out of time. Zach, are you back?
And we do have a question
Sure.
from the audience. It's anonymous. It is, do you have any tips on how to make tables with horizontal scrolling more accessible?
So tables with horizontal scrolling exempt from the Wcag accessibility guidelines. I think there's 6 different things that are exempt. Videos are exempt, graphics are exempt, and data tables are exempt. So there's 2 things that you can do. One is you have to make sure that you are defining your table rows and your cells correctly, so that every time that somebody moves from one cell to the next cell, it still tells them what row they're in and what column they're in. If I am tabbing from cell to cell and I hear 9 from my screen reader, 9 is not meaningful, okay? If I hear 9 grams of carbohydrates Oreos, because those are my row and my title, then as a blind person, I know what's going on without being able to see the screen. So it's absolutely essential that you do that. The other thing is to use vertical ellipses. So make your cells smaller, but use vertical ellipses as spillovers so that the individuals can bring that up and then choose what they want to expand, what data is important to them. And you'll be able to do both of those things without triggering any of the horizontal scrolling issues. So those are the 2 things that we do at VMware. I will give a plug for the Clarity design system. It's a fully accessible design system. It was originally tied to Angular. We now have a framework agnostic version that's come out. You can get it at clarity.design, and it's free, it's open source. We give you all the things that you need to build a fully accessible system using it. So Porsche and PayPal, for example, use the Clarity design system. We use it internally at VMware to build our own products, but we have 4 above and beyond the 60,000 people or so who use it at VMware.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you again, Sheri, for answering all those questions and for the great presentation. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. We do have to conclude this session, and we want to thank everyone for attending. We hope you learned and you enjoyed everything. we'd love to continue this conversation. So we did create a Slack channel designated to this where you can continue the conversation, maybe even have the chance to ask Sheri a few more questions if she happens to have time to jump on there. So feel free to go into the chat and join that Slack channel if you'd like to continue the conversation. Sheri, thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. And on the off chance that I can't figure out how to get into the Slack because I'm on my work computer right now and VMware's sketchy about non-VMware Slack channels, find me easily on LinkedIn because my name is spelled in the description of this talk. So I'm not hard to find. Only Bernhabers on the planet are me and people I gave birth to. So.
And don't forget to download. So sorry. Don't forget to download Sheri's free book too at accessibility.uxdesign.cc.
Appreciate that, Jack. Thank you.
Of course. Chat soon. Take care.